Good morning, all of you. Welcome to Ansarkari. So, in this video, we'll be analyzing all the important articles for their relevance and importance for the UPSC Civil Services examination for 13th of April 2023. So, we are seeing that COVID-19 cases are increasing and over 7,800 COVID cases we have recorded in single day. So surge will continue for the next 10 days as per the health ministry, but it also urges people not to panic as the variant, it is not triggering severe infection. So there is not, as if, like a major cause of concern, but we are also having mock drills and we are checking the preparedness when it comes to our healthcare infrastructure and the healthcare services and facilities. So that is the thing. But for our own safety, it is important to follow and stick to the COVID appropriate behavior. Moving on, we see that consumer inflation slides below the 6% mark for the very first time in this year. So why are we saying below 6%? Why, like, our main focus is that it should be below 6%, is that when we talk about the safe tolerance band of RBI for the inflation rate, it is between 2% to 6%. And when we talk about the exact inflation target, it is 4%. So that's why it is, we can say, a comfortable situation that if we are like recording inflation below 6% mark, then that's really good for our economy. And that's consumer inflation, that's what we are talking about, that is the CPI index. So India's retail inflation slid below 6% mark for the first time this year, and this is only the third time in the last 15 months, and it has been recorded at 5.66% in March 2023. So it is being said that we have recorded a drop because of the base effect, as the same month has recorded an almost 7% price rise last year. So last year in March, we had a CPI of 7%. In this year, we have it at 5.66%. So because of the base effect, I have explained this n number of times, both the low base and the high base effect. And moving on, as I just told you, that 2 to 6% of inflation rate is the tolerance threshold. Upper threshold is 6%, lower one is 2%. And apart from that, when we talk about the year 2022-23 financial year, so the average inflation rate recorded for the entire year was around 6.66%. So it's a relief for the consumers, and with this, we hope in coming times it would come down further. Coming to the editorial section, corporate power and the Indian inflation. So I hope it would be talking about the link between the two, the influence of corporate power and the corporates over the inflation in India. So a new explanation, it has been proposed for the recent trajectory of inflation in India with implications for its control. So let's see कि क्या new explanation की बात ये article कर रहा है. So the former deputy governor of RBI, Viral Acharya sir, he is reported to have observed on an Indian news and opinion website that unlike in the West, where it abated with the COVID-19, core inflation remains elevated in India. So अगर हम वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड की बात करें तो वहाँ पे जैसे COVID-19 कम हुआ, उसका इफेक्ट कम होने लग गया, केसेस कम होने लग गए, तो जो इन्फ्लेशन थी वो भी कम होने लग गई. बट इंडिया के केस में स्टिल हमारी कोर इन्फ्लेशन इट स्टिल रिमेन्स एट वेरी हाई लेवल. सो this he ascribes to the pricing power of 5 big corporates in India. So he says कि the main reason कि India में core inflation still remains sticky and still it is at a very high level is because of the pricing power जो 5 big corporates India के अंदर function कर रहे हैं. So it is because of that. So the narrative it has received a wide coverage in the financial press. And for readers who are not like acquainted with the jargon of the central bankers, that is core inflation, it is the all commodity inflation stripped off of the inflation of the food and fuel prices. So obviously इस चीज को हम पहले समझ चुके हैं कि हेडलाइन इन्फ्लेशन एंड कोर इन्फ्लेशन में क्या डिफरेंस है. दिस इज अ वेरी बेसिक कंसेप्ट एंड इंपॉर्टेंट कंसेप्ट व्हेन वी कम टू इकोनॉमिक्स. सो कोर इन्फ्लेशन में फूड प्राइसेस और फ्यूल प्राइसेस दे आर नॉट इंक्लूडेड. So that's what it means, and it is exactly the opposite when we talk about the headline inflation. So what is the factor of food price inflation? So we offer 5 comments on the claim that corporate pricing power it is driving the inflation in India currently. So 5 arguments here. First is that a divergence between the inflation rates in India and rest of the world, it is not new. ये पहली बार नहीं हो रहा है कि जो इन्फ्लेशन रेट इंडिया में है एंड वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड में है उसमें जो डाइवर्जेंस हमें देखने को मिल रही है वो सबसे मतलब ये कोई हमें पहली बार देखने को मिल रही है. पहले भी हमें ऐसा देखने को मिला है. एंड आफ्टर द ग्लोबल फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस 2008 में जो हुई थी, इंडियाज इन्फ्लेशन डेफिनेटली उस टाइम पे भी इंक्रीज हुई एंड इट रीच्ड लेवल्स हायर देन इट्स एपी सेंटर, नेमली द इकोनॉमीज ऑफ द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स एंड द यूके. सो उस टाइम पे भी वी सॉ कि इंडिया में इन्फ्लेशन बहुत ज्यादा इंक्रीज हुई थी कंपेयर टू दैट इन यूएस एंड यूके. सो दिस वाज ड्यू टू अ सर्ज इन द फूड प्राइस इन्फ्लेशन इन इंडिया. सो मेन फैक्टर था राइज ऑफ food prices, and this was driven by the negative agricultural shocks and high procurement price hikes. So food inflation की भी अगर हम बात करें तो उसके पीछे भी 2 मेन रीजन थे जो एग्रीकल्चरल सेक्टर में शॉक्स देखने को मिले. लाइक आप क्लाइमेट के हिसाब से बोल सकते हो कि उस ईयर में हम बोल सकते हैं उस टाइम के आसपास वी हैड रिकॉर्डेड बैड मानसून एंड सप्लाई कम हो गया या फिर कोई ऐसी नेचुरल कैलामिटी जिसकी वजह से शॉक सप्लाई शॉक we had, and उसकी वजह से food prices increased. And the second reason was high procurement price. And as the food price inflation it tends to feed into the core inflation, it would be hasty to conclude कि Indian inflation it is higher than in the West today due to the corporate pricing power. So इमीडिएटली इस कंक्लूजन पे जंप करना कि इंडिया में जो आज के टाइम में हमें इन्फ्लेशन देखने को मिल रही है दैट इज बिकॉज ऑफ द कॉर्पोरेट प्राइसिंग पावर. ऐसा नहीं है, मतलब वी कांट डायरेक्टली जंप आउट ऑन दिस कंक्लूजन. वी नीड टू गो थ्रू ऑल डिफरेंट फैक्टर्स एंड एनालाइज देम एंड लुक एट देयर इम्पैक्ट एंड व्हाट आर द मेन कॉजेस which is leading to inflation in India right now. So note that for the month of February, WPI based food price inflation, it was 2.8%, while that of the manufactured products, the largest commodity group in the index. जब हम WPI की बात करें तो largest commodity group is manufactured products and food price, basically food products, उनका weightage कम है. So it was lower than 2% जब हम manufacturing goods की बात करते हैं तो. So with food price inflation in India unabated, food prices की जो inflation है India में वो कम नहीं हो रही है. So there is no reason to assert कि core inflation should have declined even if it has in the West. So जैसे कि हमने बोला कि wholesale price index है जो होलसेल इन्फ्लेशन है वो अल्टीमेटली कोर इन्फ्लेशन में फीड इन करती है. एंड अगर होलसेल इन्फ्लेशन कम नहीं हो रही है तो हाउ कैन वी एक्सपेक्ट कि कोर इन्फ्लेशन भी कम हो जाएगी इररिस्पेक्टिव की वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड में वो कम हो रही है. तो उससे इंडिया को कोई लिंकेज नहीं है जो इन्फ्लेशन इंडिया में है. सो इंडिया में डिफरेंट फैक्टर्स वर्क कर रहे हैं तो इसलिए inflation is on a different trajectory in case of India. So this is like evidence कि in India the food price inflation they affects the core inflation. So definitely इससे हमें clarity हो जाती है and we are clear with all the doubts and confusion कि yes, food prices inflation it affects the core inflation. हालांकि core inflation में food prices are not recorded, yeah, they are not a component when we calculate the core inflation. So but irrespective of that, we are still seeing that food prices inflation still affects core inflation in case of India. And this is not surprising. After all, for food price inflation, it enters the cost of the non-agricultural sector. So जो नॉन एग्रीकल्चरल सेक्टर है उसमें फूड इन्फ्लेशन फूड प्राइसेस दे आर पार्ट ऑफ द कॉस्ट ऑफ द नॉन एग्रीकल्चरल सेक्टर. सो दैट्स हाउ वी कैन से कि it ultimately it is impacting the core inflation. Second argument is that the corporate power underlies the elevated core inflation is based on an observation of somewhat short time period. So it is true that while wholesale price inflation it has eased very considerably in the 6 months preceding March 2023, CPI it has not eased much. So wholesale prices में अगर हम देखें इसकी trajectory, so it is coming down gradually, but CPI is not. So we can say कि a mismatch between WPI and CPI inflation, it is also not new. So second challenge है, हम drawback की बात करें, mismatch between wholesale and consumer price inflation. So 2021-22 में भी wholesale price inflation it had surged by 12 percentage points, but जो consumer price inflation है actually that declined. So इस ईयर में मतलब 2021-22 में इसका ऑपोजिट हुआ, होलसेल इन्फ्लेशन थी वो इंक्रीज हो रही थी एंड कंज्यूमर इन्फ्लेशन कम हो रही थी. सो वी कैन से द मेंटेनेंस ऑफ द हाई प्राइस इंक्रीज बाय द फर्म्स इन द रिटेल सेक्टर even after the wholesale price inflation it has declined in 2022-23 may just be a compensating mechanism, that is key rising input cost to the retail sector it is being passed on with a lag. तो हम ये बोल सकते हैं कि अगर होलसेल इन्फ्लेशन ज्यादा है एंड कंज्यूमर इन्फ्लेशन कम हो रही है तो विद टाइम लैग बेसिकली इसकी वजह से जो डाइवर्जेंस हमें देखने को मिल रहा है दैट इज बिकॉज ऑफ द टाइम लैग फैक्टर. So third, attributing the elevated core inflation in the consumer prices as the wholesale prices they fall to pricing power of the big five assumes that these conglomerates they have a high presence in the retail trade. And अगर हम बोल रहे हैं कि it is because of the big five corporates कि जो core inflation है that is at still at elevated levels in India, तो we can assume कि जो ये big five conglomerates हैं they have very high presence in retail trade. So उसकी वजह से ही it is a possibility कि core inflation still it is at very high level in India. So on balance, one would expect their presence is greater in the manufacturing and the infrastructural sector than in the retail. And so अगर हम नॉर्मल एक्सपेक्टेशंस की बात करें तो हमें ये लगता होगा कि जो कॉर्पोरेट्स है बेसिक लाइक उनकी ज्यादा प्रेजेंस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एंड इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर सेक्टर में होनी चाहिए, बट दे आर ऑल्सो लाइक हाईली प्रेजेंट इन द रिटेल ट्रेड ऑल्सो. अगर हम बोल रहे हैं कि उनकी वजह से देयर इज कोर इन्फ्लेशन very high. So it may be noted that their presence in the economy itself may not be so high, but Mr. Acharya is quoted as stating that they account for 12% of the non-financial sector sales. So to us, this does not signal high pricing power. So अगर उनका सिर्फ 12% presence है in non-financial sector sales, so इसका हम ये नहीं बोल सकते कि इनका बहुत ज़्यादा influence होगा या they have the monopoly power when it comes to taking the pricing decisions and then ultimately affecting the inflation. So 12% is not that high a presence, and we can't say कि like absolutely we cannot say this thing. थोड़ा minimal impact हो सकता है on inflation but not a very high impact कि हम बोले कि solely because of their pricing power, the power that they have when it comes to pricing their products and services. So उसकी वजह से core inflation इंडिया में कम नहीं हो रही है. So we can't say this thing. Fourth is to compare the wholesale inflation and the consumer inflation, whether headline or core, is to acquiescence is in a mismatch. So the commodity basket corresponding to the consumer inflation includes such items as housing, health, education, recreation, personal care, which naturally do not enter the wholesale price index. So we know कि wholesale price index में services are not a part, and जो कंज्यूमर इन्फ्लेशन में भी जो कंज्यूमर प्राइस बेस्ड इन्फ्लेशन है सीपीआई है उसमें भी अगर हम आइटम्स की बात करें हाउसिंग, हेल्थ, एजुकेशन, रिक्रिएशन, दे लाइक डायरेक्टली दे आर नॉट अ पार्ट ऑफ द होलसेल प्राइस इंडेक्स. सो वी वुड बी लाइक कंपेयरिंग एप्पल्स विद ऑरेंजेस है अगर हम ऐसे कंपेयर करेंगे तो. And finally, lastly, we come to the point that casts the doubt most directly on the claim that corporate pricing power is driving the current inflation in India. So इस claim की अगर हम बात करें कि corporate pricing की वजह से right now we are seeing high inflation in India. So at present we have data for only the first 3 quarters of the financial year that just ended. However, in all of them we see कि over 75% of the direct contribution to inflation is by the sector in which the big five are unlikely to be represented in a big way. So अगर हम चीजें एनालाइज करें, if we analyze the data, तो we see कि जो 75% डायरेक्ट कंट्रीब्यूशन टू इन्फ्लेशन अभी हमें देखने को मिल रहा है जो भी सेक्टर्स हैं उसमें वी आर नॉट सीइंग कि जो बिग फाइव हम कंपनीज की बात करें, कॉर्पोरेट्स की बात करें, व्हिच आर फंक्शनिंग इन इंडिया, सो उनका इतना ज्यादा प्रेजेंस नहीं है उन एरियाज में जहाँ पे हम देख रहे हैं 75% ऑफ डायरेक्ट कंट्रीब्यूशन टू इन्फ्लेशन जिन सेक्टर्स की वजह से हो रही है. सो द कंट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ द फूड प्रोडक्ट्स और लॉन्ग बीन क्लोज टू 50% इन मोस्ट टाइम पीरियड. सो मेजरली फूड प्राइसेस इन्फ्लेशन ही एक मेजर फैक्टर है ऑफ इंक्रीज इन्फ्लेशन इन इंडिया राइट नाउ. एंड क्लियरली इट इज द राइजिंग प्राइस ऑफ फूड दैट इज ड्राइविंग द करंट इन्फ्लेशन इन इंडिया, एंड वी कैन नॉट से इट इज द बिग फाइव. अगर हम बोल रहे हैं फूड इन्फ्लेशन है, तो कल के आर्टिकल में हमने बात करी थी कि वन ऑफ द मेंबर्स ऑफ द मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी कमेटी शी वाज आल्सो सेइंग कि अगर इन्फ्लेशन इज बिकॉज ऑफ द सप्लाई साइड फैक्टर्स, सो इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट कि fiscal policy needs to play an important role in this case and we need to take some supply side measures. And वहाँ पे हमने ये भी बात करी थी कि either like to maintain adequate amount of supply we can import जो भी रिक्वायर्ड क्वांटिटी हमें चाहिएगी, विच वुड डेफिनेटली हेल्प इन ब्रिंगिंग डाउन द इन्फ्लेशन लेवल्स. रेपो रेट की हमने बात करी थी, क्या इंडिया में जो हमारी जो पॉलिसी है ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन टारगेटिंग, इट इज द बेस्ट अप्रोच और द बेस्ट पॉलिसी टू सूट इंडिया सिनेरियो और नॉट. एंड देन हमने एक ऑल्टरनेटिव की भी बात करी थी विच वाज बेस्ड ऑन having a structural model and not inflation targeting based model. So structural model में हमने बात करी थी कि एग्रीकल्चरल सेक्टर की वजह से अगर हमें एग्रीकल्चरल सेक्टर में बहुत ज़्यादा इन्फ्लेशन देखने को मिल रही है, तो जो भी चैलेंजेस, ड्रॉबैक्स या प्रॉब्लम्स हमें एग्रीकल्चरल सेक्टर में देखने को मिल रही है उसको हमें एड्रेस करने की ज़रूरत है, एंड उसकी वजह से वी विल बी सक्सेसफुल इन ब्रिंगिंग डाउन द इन्फ्लेशन. सो स्ट्रक्चरली मतलब चीजों को कैटेगराइज करना, देखना स्ट्रक्चरल रीजंस की वजह से इन्फ्लेशन हो रही है, तो अगेन कुछ ऐसे स्टेप्स लेना जिसकी वजह से वी आर एबल टू ओवरकम दोज चैलेंजेस एंड देन हेंस सक्सेसफुली विल बी like successful in bringing down the inflation level also. So just increasing the repo rate is not going to directly help us in bringing down the inflation, क्योंकि एक तो वो डिमांड साइड मेजर हो गया, एंड इंडिया में अगर प्रॉब्लम्स स्ट्रक्चरल हैं तो ऑब्वियसली रेपो रेट अगेन वो भी हमें लाइक सिचुएशन को नॉर्मल करने में या थोड़ा इन्फ्लेशन को कम करने में इतना ज़्यादा हेल्प नहीं करेगा. एंड एट द सेम टाइम हमने ये भी बोला था कि रेपो रेट इंक्रीज करने की वजह से कुछ नेगेटिव्स भी हैं ऑन दी ग्रोथ रेट. सो आप रेपो रेट को एंडलेसली यू कांट जस्ट कीप गो ऑन इंक्रीजिंग दैट बिकॉज उसके भी कुछ ड्रॉबैक्स हैं. सो दिस वाज प्रॉपर क्रिटिकल एनालिटिकल हमने डिस्कशन कल किया था, एंड कुछ कंपोनेंट हमने आज देख लिया कि क्या इन्फ्लेशन जो इंडिया में अभी हमें देखने को मिल रही है इट इज बिकॉज ऑफ द बिग फाइव और कॉर्पोरेट्स और नॉट. नहीं है तो क्या रीजंस हैं. एंड देन हमने यहाँ पे बेसिकली बात करी है होलसेल इन्फ्लेशन एंड जो कंज्यूमर इन्फ्लेशन है उसके बीच में जो हमें डाइवर्जेंस देखने को मिली है, अभी जो देखने को मिल रही है एंड जो हमें पहले भी देखने को मिली थी, तो उससे हमारी क्या लर्निंग्स रही वो भी हमने यहाँ पे अच्छे से समझ लिया है. तो अगर हम बात करें द करंट इन्फ्लेशन कंट्रोल स्ट्रैटेजी की, सो इन इंडिया फूड प्राइसेस दे हैव ओनली रिजन एंड इन रीसेंट ईयर्स देयर रेट ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन इट हैज बीन very high. So food inflation is the main factor which is causing a high level of inflation in India. And for all the reforms, अगर हम 1991 से सारे reforms की बात करें, the real price of the food, that is its price relative to the general price level, it has risen considerably. So real price of the food की बात करें, that is when we compare the price of the foods to their general price level, तो वो बहुत ज़्यादा increase हुआ है. And in the context, to measure the inflation without considering the price of the food is to exclude what matters most to the public. एंड अगर हम इन्फ्लेशन रेट को इस तरीके से कैलकुलेट कर रहे हैं कि हम फूड प्राइसेस को वी आर नॉट मेकिंग देम अ कंपोनेंट या उनको हम इंक्लूड नहीं कर रहे व्हेन वी आर कैलकुलेटिंग इन्फ्लेशन, तो ऑब्वियसली दैट इज नॉट गोइंग टू बी अ गुड मेजर, क्योंकि जो आम आदमी है, जो कंज्यूमर है, ऑब्वियसली फूड प्राइसेस से उनको इम्पैक्ट होता है. तो फूड प्राइसेस डेफिनेटली आर वन ऑफ द मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंट कंपोनेंट्स ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन, एंड सेंट्रल बैंकर्स का ये मानना नहीं है. सो इंडियाज इन्फ्लेशन कंट्रोल स्ट्रेटजी इट इज करंटली रिस्ट्रिक्टेड टू यूजिंग द इंटरेस्ट रेट टू डैम्पन द एग्रीगेट डिमांड. सो अभी मैंने आपको अच्छे से एक्सप्लेन किया ये सेम चीज जो इन्होंने बोला है, इंटरेस्ट रेट पे हम रिलाई कर रहे हैं इंक्रीजिंग द रेपो रेट सो दैट जो एग्रीगेट डिमांड है वो कम हो जाए. बट अभी जो मेन फैक्टर है दैट इज बिकॉज ऑफ द सप्लाई साइड, एंड अब डिमांड कम करके भी इतना ज्यादा मेजर इम्पैक्ट नहीं होगा जितना आप सप्लाई को इंक्रीज करने के लिए स्टेप्स लोगे. सो इट कन्वीनियंटली फॉर इट्स चैंपियंस absolves the policymaker from addressing the challenges of ensuring the production of food at affordable prices. So, but the most recent intervention purporting to explain the core inflation in India may have had a beneficial fallout after all. So we can say that it has re-emphasized that the RBI it has been unable to control even that inflation which central banks are assumed to be able to. So हम इतनी भी जब हम आरबीआई की बात करें तो इतनी इन्फ्लेशन भी कंट्रोल करने में अभी तक तो अनसक्सेसफुल रहे हैं, दिस वी कैन से हियर. सो ऑनलाइन डिस्प्यूट रेजोल्यूशन की अगर हम बात करें, सो इंडिया मस्ट बोर्ड दिस बस ऑफ ऑनलाइन डिस्प्यूट रेजोल्यूशंस. सो यहाँ पे we seeing कि has India missed the bus in terms of becoming an international arbitration hub or not? So even if it has, India can still play catch up with online dispute redressal system. And at the Delhi arbitration weekend in February 2023, the Union Law Minister emphasized the need for institutional arbitration to enhance the ease of doing business. So India has shown tremendous improvement in the World Bank's ease of doing business report की अगर हम बात करें, when we say कि हमारी rank increase हुई है from 142 to 263rd. 142 rank was in 2014, and it is from a total of 190 countries, and right now we were at 63 in 2019. So India, it is, however, it is also ranked at 163rd when it comes to enforcing the contracts, which is a marginal improvement for 186 rank in 2015, 173rd in 2006. So enforcing contracts, maybe we are not that good. And apart from that, यहाँ पे we have another data that the report says it takes almost 4 years and 31% of the cost of the claim to enforce a contract in India, and in contrast it takes just over 2 years and costs 22% of the claim value in Brazil. So यहाँ पे time period भी India में ज़्यादा है, and the cost of claim had to enforce a contract that is also very high compared to the countries. And India opened up its economy in 1990s. We know we had the structural reforms in 1991, which was the decade of the growth for the international arbitration also. And as more countries, they entered into the bilateral investment treaties, institutional arbitration that became the preferred choice of resolution. So institutional arbitration became the preferred choice. So at a time when pendency it is ignoring and the administration of justice, online dispute redressal, it has the potential to ensure justice for all in India. So it is important that we take adequate measures to move in this direction and setting things right. So although India it introduced its first piece of legislation on arbitration and conciliation by the middle of the decade, it acquired a reputation of being arbitration unfriendly, as the Sri Krishna Committee pointed out in 2017. So यहाँ पे एक important fact हमारे लिए ये मिलता है कि श्री कृष्णा कमेटी जो 2017 में अपॉइंट की गई थी, that was regarding the online dispute resolution thing. And the committee concluded that India is right now it is arbitration unfriendly country. So several reasons were cited for this thing, like there was lack of preference for the institutional arbitration over the ad hoc arbitration. There was frequent interference from the judiciary from the appointment of the arbitrators to the enforcement of the awards, and then setting aside of the arbitral awards on the grounds of public policy. So ऐसा हमें देखा गया है, 3 major reasons है why we can say that India was arbitration unfriendly country. So कुछ amendments की गई 2015 and 2019 में, and कुछ like recent judicial decisions, they have also put India on the right path. So things are changing and we are focusing upon online dispute resolution, and the scope for using the public policy as a ground for setting aside the awards, it has been narrowed, and there is a focus on prioritizing the institutional arbitration. So abhi, as we say कि we are moving the right path because of some recent judicial decisions and कुछ amendments की गए हैं by the parliament in the law. So उसकी वजह से we are seeing that we are now prioritizing the institutional arbitration thing. And public policy को आप reason use करके you can set aside the awards, and उसको थोड़ा और narrow down कर दिया गया है. So yet India, it is not a preferred arbitration destination still. This is not the reality. Even for the disputes which are between the Indian businesses के लिए भी, we are seeing that still India is not even the preferred destination, arbitration destination, even when it comes to the disputes between the Indian businesses. So many still they seek arbitration abroad, and even when the dispute it is with another Indian entity, so still we are seeing कि arbitration it is being sought abroad. Then we had that Singapore, it opened its International Arbitration Center, which is the Singapore International Arbitration Center in 1990s. When India was opening up for the foreign investment, it has since emerged as a global arbitration hub. So Singapore a global arbitration hub hai, and it is ranked first in terms of enforcing the contract. So Indian companies, they are amongst its top users. So Indian companies ज़्यादा rely करते हैं on the Singapore for the institutional arbitrations, and that is the thing. So this is also an important thing to know. Key Singapore it is ranked one in terms of enforcing the contracts. So taking advantage of the technology that we have, so India can still make use of its strength in the technology and emerge a front runner in the online dispute resolution. And thanks to the almost universal dissemination of the online technology during COVID-19 pandemic, when judiciary led the way with the online hearings. So COVID-19 के टाइम पे हमने देखा था कि जो इंडियन जुडिशरी थी, we were having all the hearings online at that point of time. So definitely technology ने हमें दिखाया है कि how things can function completely, they can be completely online. So one example is that of judiciary. So online dispute resolution, which is about resolving the disputes in a virtual environment, it has several advantages also. So it can reduce the burden on the courts, it can save time and the cost, and it can also provide effective resolution. So ये कुछ benefits हैं of the online dispute resolution. And so it involves more than just audio and video conferencing. So it encompasses the integration of tools such as multi-channel communication पे rely किया जाता है, and we can't say कि it is completely audio or video based. So multi-channel communication is there, case management systems हैं, automated case flows हैं, digital signatures and stamping, and even the application of the advanced technologies such as blockchain, natural language processing, artificial intelligence and machine learning. ये सारी part हैं of the online dispute resolution system. So आपके माइंड में अगर खाली ये पिक्चर है कि ऑडियो और विजुअल के थ्रू, ऑनलाइन टेक्नोलॉजी के थ्रू you can go ahead with dispute resolution. So things have massively changed in today's times with the evolving technology that we have right now at our disposal. And private platforms already they are resolving the lakhs of disputes using their online dispute resolution systems. And apart from that, Niti Aayog it has also recently claimed that India is uniquely positioned to emerge as the epicenter for the developments in online dispute resolution due to the need for an efficient dispute resolution system and advancements in the technology. So because of that, we cannot say कि अभी still India के पास we still have the opportunity to emerge as one of the major players in this area. And to facilitate this, obviously legislature, executive and judiciary उनको साथ काम करने की ज़रूरत है on this thing. And RBI, the National Payments Corporation of India, the Open Network for Digital Commerce and few other institutions, they have led the way by incorporating the ODR mechanisms into several of their initiatives. So the need now is to disseminate these at a mass scale. So इसको mass scale पे implement करना, use करना is what is required the next. So क्या steps लिए जा सकते हैं to move forward in this direction? So 3 key measures है जो ये article हमें suggest कर रहा है. So one is to incentivize the use of ODR by way of the legislative measures, such as setting ODR as a default dispute resolution tool for categories of disputes which are arising out of the online transactions, fast tracking the enforcement of the ODR outcomes, and exempting or reducing the stamp duty and the court fees. So एक ये measure है legislative तरीके से, we can make it as the default dispute resolution tool. Second is solving the infrastructural challenges, curbing the digital divide, and catalyze the ODR's growth by optimizing the existing setups. Like we have Aadhaar Kendras to also function as the ODR kiosks, and that can be leveraged. Third is that the government departments, they should explore the ODR as a grievance redress mechanism. And proactive use of the ODI by the government entities, it will not only increase the trust in the process, but also ensure that citizens they have access to a convenient and the cost-effective means of resolving the disputes with the government. So obviously, agar government departments would be relying on this mechanism, so logo ka trust on this process, on this system would increase, and also it would make the process thoda cost effective for the people and convenient bhi ho jayega. So at the time jab we are seeing कि India में pendency of cases बहुत ज़्यादा increase हो रहे हैं, so ODR, it has the potential to ensure justice for all at everyone's fingerprints. And India, it may have missed the bus to become an arbitration hub, but it can still catch up and overtake them all online. So definitely, we still have the opportunity in our hands right now. Coming to text and context, the role of the parliamentary committee is extremely important topic for us. So due to the sheer volume of the information, the scale of operations that the Indian parliament is required to undertake, it is not feasible to take up all the issues on the floor of the house. Definitely cases इतने सारे हैं, चीजें इतनी सारी हैं discuss करने के लिए कि it is just not possible कि आप हर चीज को discuss करोगे on the parliament, on the floor of the house. And the parliamentary committees, then they are constituted to delve deeper into the matters of the public concern and develop the expert opinion. So parliamentary committees क्या करती हैं, जो भी important issues होते हैं, they take up that and which are related to the public concern, and उन पे एक expert opinion develop करना, proper research and analyze करके चीजों को लेके आना, चीजों को निकालना is what the most important function of the parliamentary committees includes. So we see that the former president of the USA, Woodrow Wilson, once remarked that it is not far from the truth to say that Congress in session is Congress on the public exhibition, whilst Congress in committee rooms is Congress at work. So that's very true, and the universality of this statement seems to have stood the test of the times in the geography. So it is definitely universally applicable. And due to the sheer volume of information, scale of operations joined in parliament, it is required to undertake. It is not feasible to take up all the issues on the floor of the house. Definitely, ये sentence ऊपर लिखा हुआ था, so thus the parliamentary committees, the panels which are made up of member of parliament. So अगर हम members की बात करें, parliamentary committees है तो obviously MPs are their members and they're constituted to deal with such situations and take up the sector specific concerns. So हर committee का role अलग है and जो concerns उनको लेने होते हैं, जो issue उनको लेने होते हैं, discuss करने होते हैं, वो as per their role it has been divided. So contrary to the popular perception, looking into the bills is not the only purpose जो committee serve करती हैं. So जो bills पार्लियामेंट में इंट्रोड्यूस किए जाते हैं, उनको डेफिनेटली जो बिल्स की डिटेल्स हैं, कुछ इश्यूज हैं, कुछ चैलेंजेस हैं, कुछ ड्रॉबैक्स हैं, या किसी एक प्रोविजन पे कुछ कंसर्न नहीं है, वो डेफिनेटली उन चीज़ों के अंदर तो डेफिनेटली पार्लियामेंट्री कमिटीज को एनालाइज एंड प्रॉपर लाइक देखना होता है सब कुछ, but we tend to underestimate their relevance, not realizing the sheer magnitude of the effort that goes into making the parliament a dynamic, functional space where members they converge every few months and debate on matters that concern the nation. So इस चीज को हम undermine करते हैं, इतना ज़्यादा हम इस चीज को recognize नहीं कर पाते हैं. So behind every such speech, every comment and every bill introduced or taken up for the discussion lies the ceaseless work of the various committees that deserves a nuanced perusal if we are to understand how the higher platform of multilateral dialogue in India is brought to life. So, however, agar we see this in these times of the political rancor and polarization, public proceedings of the House seem to reflect serious fault lines. So it does not allow for any deliberation, let alone the consensus. And during the course of 17 Lok Sabha, which is the current one, we see that only 14 bills they have been referred for further examination so far. So only 14 they have been referred to the parliamentary committees for further examination. And as per the data from PRS, we see a little as 25% of bills which are introduced, they were referred to the committees in the 16th Lok Sabha, and as compared to 71% and 60% in the 15th and the 14th Lok Sabha respectively. So we are seeing कि जितने जो number of bills हैं जो parliamentary committees को refer किए जा रहे हैं, वो gradually हर मतलब next लोकसभा के बाद, हर successive लोकसभा के बाद कम होता जा रहा है. So this represents a declining trend of the national legislation being subjected to expert scrutiny. So definitely हम ये बोल सकते हैं कि जो expert advice, जो expert opinion हमें parliamentary committee से मिलता है on the bills which are tabled in the parliament, वो कम होता जा रहा है. So अगर हम committees की evolution की बात करें, so let's understand their evolution first. So even though a structured committee system, it was only established in 1993 में, we had a proper structured committee system. So individual committees, they were being formed for various reasons as far back as independence also. So for instance, 5 of the many crucial committees of the Constituent Assembly, they are worth a mention here. So जो Constituent Assembly की 5 मेन क्रूशल कमिटीज थी, तो उनकी बात करें तो there was the ad hoc committee on citizenship laws. As the name suggests, it was formed to discuss the nature and the scope of Indian citizenship. 2 other were very significant committees were the Northeast Frontier, that is Assam, Northeast Frontier Tribal and Excluded Areas Subcommittee बनाई गई, and then the Excluded and the Partially Excluded Areas Subcommittee बनाई गई. So the former one was chaired by Bordoloi, Jane Bordoloi, and covered, so this committee covered the Naga, Khasi, Garo, Jaintia, and Mikir Hills and collected a reservoir of the people's lived experience and demands, beliefs, and the customs. So it looked at the status of the land and the forest, local government. So ये सारे कुछ यहाँ पे mention है कि किन different areas में different committees ने काम किया and क्या उनका function and role था. So then there was also an expert committee on the financial provisions of the Union Constitution, which was responsible for giving recommendations on Union and province tax collection की बात करें हम central excise duty की collection. So इन सारे areas में liquor revenue, divisible pool of the income tax, sharing of proceeds among the provinces, residuary powers. So ये सारी जो subjects थे, they were a part of the expert committee on the financial provision of Union Constitution. So in essence, the committees, they have been doing monumental work since the unveiling of independent India. And today, both the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, उनके पास अपनी खुद की standing committees होती हैं, ad hoc committees होती हैं, and there are also joint committees with representation both from both the houses of the parliament. So I hope कि आप लोगों को इसके difference के भी like जो difference है between the standing committees and the ad hoc committees वो आपको clear है. अगर नहीं है तो you can go ahead and search. So ये पता होना important है. So कुछ joint committees भी हैं, ad hoc committees भी हैं, standing committees भी हैं. So in committees की role की बात करें तो the committees, they go into the details of the specific piece of legislation, analyze the impact it may have on the governance indicators, and then make their recommendations. So main role तो इन committees का यही है, जो भी legislation है specific उनकी details में जाके analyze करना कि अगर ये change किया जाता है, इसको implement किया जाता है, तो इसका क्या impact होगा on the governance, on the citizens. And then accordingly they make some recommendations to the parliament. So government, that it is required to table an action taken report for the house to judge the progress that is made on the suggestions of the committee. So इसके ऊपर भी जो government progress करती है, जो भी suggestions दिए जाते हैं by this committee, so government to it has to present a action taken report, ताकि हमें ये पता चलता रहे कि जो भी recommendations किए गए हैं उस पे government ने कितना काम किया है. So जो committee की reports हैं, they are not binding on the government, but definitely इससे government को, इससे legislature को बहुत help मिलती है when it comes to having an oversight on the executive. So for instance, during the recently concluded budget session, reports were tabled on the demand for grants, which highlighted certain inconsistencies on the part of the government. So Committee on the Rural Development and Panchayati Raj, in its report, it noted that the revised estimates always fell short of the budget estimates. And also, more importantly, the actual figures are also, they are also way less. So यहाँ कुछ examples हैं. Current progress की यहाँ बात की है, and road ahead की अगर हम बात करें, The US committees, they play a crucial role. In US, these committees definitely they play a crucial role and bills they refer to them post the introduction for scrutiny, and it allows changes to be made in the modified bill. Then it goes for voting. So Parliament could consider a compulsory referral for the bills that are tabled on the floor. So अभी ऐसा कुछ नहीं है कि जितने भी bills table किए जाते हैं on the floor of the house वो सब पार्लियामेंट्री कमिटीज के पास जाते हैं. ऐसा अभी कोई प्रोविजन नहीं है, बट एज अ सजेशन, एज अ रिकमेंडेशन, दिस आर्टिकल इज सजेस्टिंग कि ऐसा कुछ किया जाना चाहिए कि कंपलसरी रेफरल होना चाहिए. एंड देन आर्मिंग देम विद मोर पावर्स, पार्लियामेंट्री कमिटीज को ज्यादा पावर दी जानी चाहिए. विल दैट विल हेल्प them to ensure the accountability from the executive instead of making them toothless tigers. So अगर वो ये करने में सक्सेसफुल हो पाएंगे तो डेफिनेटली they would be becoming a very important part of the Indian democracy. So that's there, and it is essential for the parliamentary ecosystem in India to institutionalize such procedures and not allow the political considerations to hasten the lawmaking. So political considerations या political जो factors हैं उनका इतना ज़्यादा influence नहीं होना चाहिए when it comes to hastening the lawmaking thing. एंड पार्लियामेंट्री कमिटीज की पावर थोड़ी और इंक्रीज की जा सकती है व्हेन इट कम्स टू कि वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले कर सकती है इन टर्म्स ऑफ इंश्योरिंग अकाउंटेबिलिटी ऑफ द एग्जीक्यूटिव. एंड अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट कंपल्सरी रेफरल भी, इस पे भी हमें सोचने की जरूरत है. सो लार्ज हाड्रॉन कोलाइडर की अगर हम बात करें, सो अभी जब हम पिछले 3-4 दिन से लीगो इंडिया की बात कर रहे थे तो तब वहाँ पे वी वर मेंशनिंग अबाउट द लार्ज हाड्रॉन कोलाइडर, एंड टुडे वी हैव द एंटायर आर्टिकल ओवर इट. So it was the ATLAS and the CMS detectors of the Large Hadron Collider that discovered the Higgs boson in 2012. So ये बहुत important discovery थी by it, and here is a simple explanation of how it works and what it has found and what lies ahead of the world's largest science experiment. Definitely आप picture में देख सकते हो how it has been built, and it was successful in identifying and discovering the Higgs boson in 2012. So the Large Hadron Collider, it is built by the European Organization for the Nuclear Research, which is CERN, and it is on the energy frontier of the physics research, conducting experiments with highly energized subatomic particles. So firstly, it is very large, so that's why it is called the Large Hadron Collider, and it is the world's largest science experiment. Second, it is a collider, so it accelerates two beams of particles in opposite directions and smashes them head on. So that's why it is a collider कि दो beam of particles opposite directions से project की जाती हैं and they collide head on. And third is that these particles, they are hadrons. So currently engineers, they are warming up it for its third session of operation following the upgrades that will have made the collider and its detectors more sensitive and accurate than before. So it will start collecting data again from mid-May. So third time इसको use किया जाएगा in May. And इसके functioning की बात करें तो hadron की अगर हम बात करें, hadron it's a subatomic particle which is made up of more smaller particles. So the LHC, it uses protons, which are made up of quarks and gluons. So it energizes the protons by accelerating them through a narrow circular pipe that is 27 kilometers long. So simply put, this pipe encircles two D-shaped magnetic fields created by almost 9,600 magnets. Say there is a proton at the 3 o'clock position, and it is made to move from there to the 9 o'clock position by turning on one hemisphere of the magnets and turning off the other, such that the magnetic field acting on the protons causes it to move clockwise. So magnetic field का बहुत important role है. Magnetic field के through these protons, they are made to move as per the desired direction. And as per once it reaches the 9 o'clock position, then the magnetic polarity, it is reversed by turning off the first hemisphere. So जब ये desired position पे पहुंच जाता है proton, उसके बाद जो magnetic polarity है उसको completely reverse कर दिया देता है, reverse कर देते हैं. And उसके बाद this causes the proton to move in anti-clockwise direction. So उसके बाद it starts moving in anti-clockwise direction, and this way by switching the direction the magnetic field more and more rapidly, protons they can be accelerated through the beam pipe. So इस process को और थोड़ा accelerated तरीके से किया जाएगा, तो that's how the proton is also accelerated through the beam pipe. And in this process of acceleration, then these protons, they gain tremendous amount of energy according to the special theory of relativity. So यहाँ पे भी आपको confuse नहीं होना है. There are two theories. एक तो है special theory of relativity and one is general theory of relativity. So इनके जो बीच में difference था ये हम already ले चुके हैं in detail. So यहाँ पे effects of collision की बात की गई है, and then findings of the Large Hadron Collider. So it consists of 9 detectors. So they are located over different points on the beam pipe, and then they study the particle interactions which happens inside that beam pipe. So हमने बोला कि 2012 में Higgs boson was discovered and it was confirmed. These were definitely confirmed in 2013 also. So हमने इसके वर्किंग की बात कर ली है, एंड आने वाले टाइम में व्हाट कैन वी एक्सपेक्ट, या किन चीज़ों पे काम किया जा रहा है, क्या किस तरीके से एक्सपेरिमेंट्स किए जा रहे हैं. सो उसकी थोड़ी बात कर लेते हैं. सो इसमें दी सक्सेसेस दे स्ट्राइक कॉन्ट्रास्ट विद व्हाट द लार्ज hadron collider hasn't been able to find. दैट इज न्यू फिजिक्स की अगर हम बात करें आने वाले टाइम पे इस पे फोकस किया जा रहा है. दैट इज द कलेक्टिव नेम फॉर द पार्टिकल्स और द प्रोसेसेस दैट कैन एक्सप्लेन द नेचर ऑफ द डार्क मैटर और व्हाई gravity is such a weak force among the other mysteries. So जो बाकी questions है जिनके आंसर्स हमें आज तक नहीं मिले हैं उनके ऊपर now would be focus in the coming times. and यहाँ पे न्यू फिजिक्स की बात की जा रही है so that हमें पता चले कि नेचर ऑफ डार्क मैटर उसके बारे में थोड़ी एक्सप्लेनेशन हमें मिले, रीजनिंग मिले. एंड नेक्स्ट इज कि ग्रेविटी क्यों इतना वीक फोर्स है कंपेयर टू द अदर थिंग्स. सो इस पे काम किया जा रहा है. So 4 Jawans, they were shot dead in Bhatinda's military station, and it is neither a terrorist attack nor an attack from outside, but a fratricidal incident. And this is what the senior Punjab police officials after the initial investigation has to say. So follow the gold standard of open tender route in the defense procurement. So ये होता क्या है? So in the case of procurement, the defense platforms. So जब defense platforms जो different procurements किए जाते हैं, equipment procure किए जाते हैं, either under the capital or the revenue route, gold standard of open tender, it should be adopted to the extent possible as per our defense minister, and he stressed the need to maximize the value of the money spent on the security needs. So a competitive bid-based procurement process, which is open to all, it is the best possible way to realize the full value of the money spent. And there would be some rare cases when it may not be possible to go for an open tender process. So such instances, they should come under the exceptions, and exceptions, they should not become the rule. So अभी जो कुछ हमने recently biggest deal sign करी थी, like the intergovernmental agreements, which includes the 36 Rafale fighter jets, S-400 long range air defense systems, and the 4 stealth frigates. So transparent system पे focus किया जा रहा है while stressing the need to devise the innovative methods to maximize the value of the money spent on the security needs of the country, terming a robust defense finance system as the backbone of a strong military. He said that it is difficult to apply the economic concept of full value of money in the defense expenditure, as in this sector there is no visible revenue stream and no easily identifiable beneficiaries. So यहाँ पे defense sector की अगर हम बात करें तो that is the thing, and it is very important. Innovative methods पे बात कर रहे हैं हम, but still we are seeing कि जो हम जितने भी हम value of money, public money spend करें in the defense sector, उसको जितना ज़्यादा maximize कर सकते हैं, that would be the best way forward. So Ukraine to address needs of the medical students as per a Ministry of External Affairs. So जो medical students इंडिया में लेके आए गए थे because of the war, यूक्रेन बोल रहा है हम उनकी नीड्स को डेफिनेटली एड्रेस करेंगे. सो तेजस राफेल सुखोई टू फेस ऑफ विद द यूएस फाइटर जेट्स एट कोप इंडिया 23. So light combat aircraft, Tejas, we have Rafale, we have Sukhoi 30 MKI and Jaguars of the Indian Air Force. They are all set to undertake maneuvers with F-15 fighters and B-1B long-range bombers of the US Air Force from Thursday under the second phase of the ongoing bilateral exercise, which is named COPE India 23. So exercise का name हमारे लिए important हो जाता है and that is the thing. So USA Pacific Air Forces are there on a visit in India. So Justice Ranganath Mishra Committee that is related to the religious and linguistic minorities, which recommended scheduled caste reservation for the Dalit converts to Christianity and Islam. It is not all that perfunctory, adding key government may need to recheck its stance on this report. So Supreme Court ये पूछ रहे कि क्या इस report को can it be used to decide on the quota for the Dalit converts or not? So Justice Ranganath Mishra Committee is related to it. So this can be asked in prelims. So credit system will integrate the general and the vocational education system. And this is what the University Grants Commission Chairman said. Recently released the National Credit Framework would function as a broad enabling framework for all the regulatory organizations and universities, including institutions of national importance. So it's a meta framework to seamlessly integrate the credits earned through the school education, higher education, and vocational and skill education. So he also said that the national education policy had put emphasis on the integration of the general academic education, vocational and skill education, which would provide seamless horizontal and vertical mobility between the two streams for the lifelong learning. So Xi Jinping tells PLA to strengthen the training for the actual combat. So military must resolutely defend China's territorial sovereignty and maritime interest and strive to protect the overall peripheral stability. This is what the president says the day after concluding drills around the Taiwan. So Taiwan Strait may definitely tensions are on the rise. So China sets up no-fly zone near Taiwan, says Tepi. And China will set up a brief no-fly zone north of the Taiwan on Sunday due to what the island's transport ministry described as the space activities. So the closure comes after Beijing completed 3 days of massive war games around the self-ruled Taiwan. Taliban say there is no obstacle for UN work in Afghanistan. And recently decision लिया गया था कि women would not be allowed to work. So the Taliban chief spokesman said on Wednesday that there are no obstacles for the UN to function in Afghanistan after they barred the Afghan women from working at the global body. So definitely women freedom, women rights पे बहुत सारे restrictions and restrictions imposed kiye ja rahe by the Taliban regime, and this is the recent one. So UN says that it cannot accept the decision, calling it unlawful and an unparalleled violation of the women's rights. So it says that women are crucial for the delivery of life-saving aid to millions of Afghans and has instructed its national staff to stay at home. So Macron wants status quo on Taiwan, insists France won't be a US vassal. So right now, the stand is France is not supporting USA when it comes to the Taiwan region, the situation there. So index of industrial production rises 5.6% year on year in Feb, but slides from the January level. So consumer durables shrink for third successive month. Output in the non-durables also contracts by 6% compared to the January levels, and most sectors they record lower production month on month. So India's industrial output has grown by 5.6% in Feb, and that is only marginally higher than 5.45% in January. Manufacturing output, it picked up pace, and electricity generation, it grew less than 10%, and intermediate goods, they shrank by 0.3%. The US consumer price gains are slow and inflation pressures, they're still persist in USA. So recently USA inflation data has been made available. So US consumer prices barely they rose in March as the cost of the gasoline declined, but stubbornly they remain. We see that high rents they kept underlying inflation pressures simmering, likely ensuring that the Federal Reserve will raise the interest rates again next month. सो इतने ज्यादा अभी कंफर्टेबल सिचुएशन में हम नहीं बोल सकते हैं कि इन्फ्लेशन यूएसए में भी बहुत ज्यादा कम हो गई है या जो उनका 2% का टारगेट है उसके आसपास पहुंच गई है तो इतना ज्यादा अभी वी कांट से कि वी आर इन अ कंफर्टेबल सिचुएशन राइट नाउ So Reserve Bank of India has issued a draft circular on fair lending practice, penal charges on the loan accounts to regulate penal interest levied by the lenders. So IRDAI, which is the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India, regulator of the insurance sector in India, it tells the insurers to boost capital for expanding the reach. So to augment capital while inviting new players to enter the sector in its bid to achieve 100% insurance coverage in India by 2047. So he said that switching over to the international financial reporting standards was also underway, and all of this would help the industry going forward in efficient use of the capital while aiding the companies and the regulator to assess risk in real times. So we have this target कि by 2047, that is in next 25 years, जब India 100 years of independence complete कर लेगा. So we have this target कि we have 100% insurance coverage. So उसको ensure करने के लिए a step in that direction. Basically, he's saying, the chairman is saying कि it is important to expand reach को expand करने के लिए capital को boost करना is important. So the investment landscape is also being rebuilt to attract more investment through FDI route. And right now the limit it has been enhanced to 74% from 49%. So FDI limit insurance sector mein it has been increased to 74%. Taking up mint section. So end of online gaming in Tamil Nadu, it is not that simple. So abhi jo bill pass kiya hai Tamil Nadu mein regarding the online gaming. So Tamil Nadu, it has banned online gambling, rekindling a campaign against gaming firms in India that has raged for over a year and a half. So the move, it came just 3 days after the center, it included gaming firms under its intermediary rules. So what just happened in Tamil Nadu? So after much back and forth, we see Tamil Nadu mein jo prohibition of online gambling and regulation of online games ordinance that it was passed, and the bill seeks to prohibit online gambling and its promotion through advertising and more. So there are punitive measures like jail term ki baat ki gayi hai and fine ki baat ki gayi hai. For those who are facilitating these games, punishment is also imprisonment by up to 1 year, fine of 5 lakh. And gambling being a state subject, so MK Stalin-led government, it is well within its right to regulate it within its borders. So gambling it is a state subject. So gaming firms ka kya कहना है? So Tamil Nadu's ban, it includes rummy, poker, two games that have long faced court battles over their regality. So rummy and poker completely banned है तमिलनाडु के अंदर. So Indian law says कि games of skill उनको you cannot be considered gambling. So जो game of skill है and एक होते हैं game of chance जो gambling वगैरह से related होते हैं. So games of skill है आप उनको gambling नहीं बोल सकते हो. So these include the likes of fantasy game, Dream 11 हो गया, horse racing हो गया. So rummy it was described as a game of skill by the Supreme Court over 50 years ago. राइट ना आप नहीं बोल सकते हो. राइट ना ऑब्वियसली 50 साल पहले जो था वो आज नहीं हो सकता है. एंड वाइल पोकर डज नॉट हैव अ सिमिलर सुप्रीम कोर्ट अप्रूवल, several high court rulings they have categorized this as a game of skill. So पोकर के ऊपर सुप्रीम कोर्ट की रूलिंग नहीं है बट स्टिल डिफरेंट हाई कोर्ट्स ने रूलिंग्स दी हैं जिसमें उन्होंने बोला है कि पोकर इज आल्सो गेम ऑफ स्किल. सो सिंस इंडियाज कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन सेज कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट रूलिंग बिकम्स लॉ ऑफ द लैंड, गेमिंग फर्म्स दे आर आर्ग्यूइंग कि तमिलनाडु ऑर्डिनेंस इट रन्स अगेंस्ट द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ऑन दिस बेसिस. तो गेमिंग फर्म्स ये बोल रही हैं कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बोला हुआ है, डिफरेंट हाई कोर्ट्स इन इंडिया ने बोला हुआ है कि दीज टू गेम्स बोथ रमी एंड पोकर दे आर नॉट अ गेम ऑफ चांस या गैम्बलिंग नहीं बोल सकते हैं. दे आर मतलब they have been declared as games of skill by the court. So as we say कि Constitution of India बोलता है कि जो Supreme Court की rulings है they become a law of land. and तो gaming firms का कहना ये है कि जो law तमिलनाडु में जो ordinance पास किया गया है that is against the Constitution, citing these reasons. सो सेंटर का क्या स्टैंड है. सो 7 अप्रैल पे वी सॉ कि 7 अप्रैल को सेंटर इट अमेंडेड द इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी रूल्स टू इंक्लूड गेमिंग फर्म्स एज इंटरमीडियरीज. सो गेमिंग फर्म्स को भी इंटरमीडियरीज की कैटेगरी में इंक्लूड किया गया है. एंड दीज रूल्स दे गिव द गेमिंग फर्म्स द सेम प्रोटेक्शन एज अ सोशल मीडिया फर्म्स अंडर द आईटी एक्ट. So some argue that this means the center considers online games legal. And however, IT rules form what is called the delegated legislation. They pass on the responsibility of regulating a sector to certain authorities, and in this case, self-regulatory bodies to be accredited by the government. So they do not overrule the state's power to regulate gambling. So ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. And why does the Tamil Nadu ban worry the gaming firms? So obviously gaming firms की जो activities revenue इसके ऊपर impact होगा. Tamil Nadu has clarified that only online gambling ban किया गया है within the borders and ordinance does not apply to all the online games. So only online gambling को target किया गया है. And gambling firms they worry the ordinance may set a precedent for other states also. So ऐसा बाकी states भी कर सकती है in coming times. And there are advocates the bans on the online games like rummy poker within the overall gaming industry in India too also. So they worry कि stigma of gambling attached to these games may cast a shadow on all the mobile and the online games that require users to pay money for winnings. Coming to Financial Express. सो इस चीज को हम पूरा एनालाइज कर चुके हैं. इन्फ्लेशन 15 मंथ लो पे है. इंडेक्स ऑफ इंडस्ट्रियल प्रोडक्शन इंक्रीज हो रहा है. सो आरबीआई की एक्सपेक्टेशन अगर हम बात करें परसेंटेज चेंज ईयर ऑन ईयर, सो 5.2% इज द करंट फाइनेंशियल ईयर में जो एक्सपेक्टेशन है ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन. आई थिंक दिस इज जीडीपी की जो एक्सपेक्टेशन है 5.2%. but this could be inflation also because we're talking about inflation. यहाँ पे mention नहीं है, it is just talking about in percentage change RBI expectation, so it would be inflation. IIP का यहाँ पे trajectory या trend हमें दिखा रखा है. Sharper fall in rural inflation अभी हमें देखने को मिल रही है. यहाँ पे आप देख सकते हैं रूरल में ज्यादा फॉल हो रही है, अर्बन में ऑलमोस्ट स्टैग्नेंट है. So that's there. सो यहाँ पे भी यही बात की जा रही है, सीपीआई इन्फ्लेशन 6% लेवल के नीचे रिकॉर्ड की गई है. सो बेस इफेक्ट एंड ब्रॉड बेस्ड फॉल इन द प्राइस प्रेशर्स हैज हेल्प्ड. एंड यहाँ पे यू हैव डिफरेंट इकोनॉमिस्ट उनका क्या मानना है. सो दैट्स देयर. स्ट्रॉन्गर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर आईआईपी में यू हैव रिकॉर्डेड. So multilateral development banks का जो evolution dialogue है, it needs to be more inclusive as per our finance minister. So she is there in US. She's going to attend the World Bank and IMF meetings. So Sitaraman and Gopinath, they discuss the debt vulnerabilities and the cryptocurrencies. So you can see in the picture, and Union Finance Ministers Nirmala Sitaraman and Geeta Gopinath, she's the first Deputy Managing Director of IMF. They met and they discussed a range of issues like the debt vulnerabilities of the developing countries and the crypto-related challenges. So food inflation, it falls sharper than the headline rate in March. So that is very nice कि अगर food inflation sharply कम हो रही है, but at the same time हमें ये चीज भी ध्यान में रखना important है कि food inflation बहुत volatile है. अगर वो sharply increase हुई, fall हुई है तो वो sharply increase भी हो सकती है, but for the time being it is a good thing, and it's good कि inflation कम होती हुई हमें दिखाई दे रही है. So यहाँ पे सारी चीजें already discussed हैं. Moving on to the Indian Express, Bhatinda Army base mein we saw ki 4 soldiers, they were shot dead, and it appears to be an internal incident as per the police right now. Directly coming to the editorial section, and then we'll be moving on to the explained section. So the practical statesman took precedence over the uncompromising prophet. As per Jawaharlal Nehru, these are his words. So some of small things. New list of the national parties show ki how the opposition is still regional when the challenge is national. So इसमें हमारे लिए जो important चीज है जो हम already देख चुके हैं, that is what are the conditions जो एक party political party को fulfill करनी होते हैं in order to get the tag of either the state party or the national party. So that is important for us from the examination perspective. And so IMF ने इंडिया का जो ग्रोथ फोरकास्ट है उसको थोड़ा और कम कर दिया था because we are seeing inflation, it remains above the target level, and policy must preserve the macroeconomic stability. So that's very important, and we are right now we're on the right path and we're trying to take some measures. And inflation की अगर हम बात करें, कम करने की बात करें, बहुत ज़्यादा we have discussed कि even experts का क्या कहना है, member of monetary policy committee का क्या कहना था कि it is because of the supply side factors की inflation हमें देखने को मिल रही है, and fiscal policy का भी बहुत important role है which should come forward. उस area में भी कुछ steps लिए जाने चाहिए in order to reduce the inflation. So coming to the explained page, JUICE mission क्या है? So it is European Space Agency. It is scheduled to launch the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer mission. So JUICE goes to Jupiter. It is of the European Space Agency, an important fact for us. And Jupiter and its 4 planet-sized moons, which are called the Galilean satellites, you can see in this picture. And what is the JUICE mission? So according to ESA website, JUICE, it will make detailed observations of the giant gas planet and its 3 large ocean-bearing moons. So unke names hain, and by using the remote sensing, geophysical, and its in situ instruments, it would be doing that. क्या ये capable है of detecting life or not? So according to SAE, the European Space Agency, life on these moons could be in the form of microbes. So more advanced species might also be present there, like the ones we detect in deep sea trenches or at the hydrothermal vents on Earth, such as various kinds of corals, worm, mussel, shrimp, and fish. But JUICE mission जो है, it isn't equipped to detect life, and what it is capable of is finding out whether there could be places around Jupiter inside the icy moons where the necessary conditions to sustain life, such as water, biological essential elements, energy, and stability, whether they are present or not. So it is capable of finding that. So the train to Kashmir in less than a year, Vande Bharat Express, it could be running between Jammu and Srinagar, revolutionizing the transportation of people and goods in the Union Territory and bringing the Kashmir Valley closer to the rest of India. So we are seeing recently अभी एक और route inaugurate किया गया है when we talk about Delhi, Kant and Ajmer. And apart from that, so Supreme Court ki recent Agnipath ruling, what is the promissory estoppel? So Supreme Court on Monday dismissed the petitions challenging the Delhi High Court's judgment that upheld the Agnipath scheme for recruitment to the armed forces. So Supreme Court ने इसको बेसिकली जो पिटिशंस चैलेंज कर रही थी दिल्ली हाई कोर्ट की जो जजमेंट थी व्हिच अपहेल्ड द अग्निपथ स्कीम फॉर द रिक्रूटमेंट टू द आर्म फोर्सेस, सो उन पिटिशंस को सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने डिसमिस किया है. सो सम ऑफ द पिटिशनर्स दे इंक्लूडेड कैंडिडेट्स who had been shortlisted in the earlier recruitment process. So these were the petitioners. So Advocate Prashant Bhushan, who appeared for some candidates, he told the courts their names appeared in the provisional list for the recruitment to the Air Force, but the recruitment was cancelled jab Agnipath scheme was notified. So he said that government must be directed to complete the old process, citing the doctrine of promissory estoppel. So let's understand the doctrine kya hai. It is a concept developed in the contractual laws. So a valid contract under the law, it requires an agreement to be made with the sufficient consideration. So a claim of doctrine of promissory estoppel essentially prevents a promisor from backing out of an agreement on the grounds that there is no consideration. So this is what this doctrine of promissory estoppel talks about, कि promisor back out नहीं कर सकता है agreement से. And so सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने एक चेकलिस्ट दे रखी है जब ये डॉक्ट्रीन को अप्लाई किया जा सकता है, and this was given in 1981 in this case. And the first is that there must be a clear promise. पहली कंडीशन ये है. दूसरी में the plaintiff must have acted relying reasonably on that promise. Third is the plaintiff must have suffered a loss. So application in the Agnipath case में, so Bhushan said कि the government putting up a shortlist was a promise made by it. So government ने promise किया था कि जो भी name shortlist किए जाएंगे they would be recruited. So he's saying कि this was the government, it made a promise, and the candidates they refused other jobs based on that promise, and now they must be compensated for that क्योंकि उनको finally recruit नहीं किया गया. So the judges they refused this argument, and CJ he pointed out that promissory estoppel is always subject to overarching public interest. And Justice P.S. Narasimha added that this is not a contract matter where promissory estoppel in public law was applied. It is public employment. So contract matter nahi hai. This is what they said. So Russian oil imports sweeten as the low sulfur grades drives the growth. So March marked a new record for India's import of Russian oil, but the growth is now being driven by the sweetener or the low sulfur grades of crude and not the sour or the high sulfur Urals, which has been accounting for a bulk of the oil supplies from the Moscow, shows an analysis of the data from the energy cargo tracker Vortexa. So इसके पीछे रीजन क्या है. So पहले मतलब जो हम ऑयल इंपोर्ट कर रहे थे रशिया में से, उरल्स में से it was being extracted या फिर made, so that was sour and that had high sulfur content, but right now we are shifting towards the low sulfur grade which is much more sweet. So ये पता होना चाहिए अगर सल्फर कम होता है तो it is more sweet and high sulfur होता है तो it is more sour. So reason Indian refiners they purchase commitments, but Indian refiners purchase commitments for the sour grades under term contracts with the traditional suppliers in West Asia. So अगर हम पहले की बात करें तो sour जो क्रूड ऑयल था वो हम वेस्ट एशिया से इंपोर्ट करते थे. सो शेयर ऑफ उराल्स की बात करें, उराल्स इज अ माउंटेन व्हिच सेपरेट्स रशिया फ्रॉम द यूरोप या ईस्टर्न यूरोप हम बोल सकते हैं या एशिया फ्रॉम यूरोप. एंड शेयर ऑफ यूराल्स इट अकाउंटेड फॉर close to 80% of the India's Russian oil imports January में, and that is contracted to 70% in March. So India imported a total of 1.65 million barrels per day of the Russian oil in March, including 1.16 million of Urals crude. So in all, Russia again topped the list of the crude suppliers in March with a 34% share in the India's oil imports. So highest अभी हम रशिया से import कर रहे हैं. And that is the thing. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining in Sarkari. And there's also a PDF link in the description box. So do not forget to have a look at that. And please subscribe to our channel if you haven't, if you're following this every single day and if you're benefiting out of these analysis videos, and also hit the like button for this video. Thank you so much.